Hello, Squirrel Squad. Chapter 14, Plays at Plumfield. As it is impossible for the humble historian of the March family to write a story without theatricals in it, as for our dear Miss Young, Yonge, to get on with less than 12 or 14 children in her interesting tales, we will accept the fact, and at once cheer ourselves after the last afflicting events by proceeding to the Christmas plays at Plumfield, for they influence the fate of several of our characters and cannot well be skipped. When the college was built, Mr. Lorry added a charming little theater, which not only served for plays, but declamations, lectures, and concerts. The drop curtain displayed Apollo with the muses grouped about him, and as a compliment to the donor of the hall, the artist had given the god a decided resemblance to our friend, which was considered a superb joke by everyone else. Home talent furnished stars, stock company, orchestra, and scene painter, and astonishing performances were given on this pretty little stage. Mrs. Joe had been trying for some time to produce a play which should be an improvement upon the adaptations from the French then in vogue, curious mixtures of fine toilettes, false sentiment, and feeble wit, with no touch of nature to redeem them. It was easy to plan plays full of noble speeches and thrilling situations, but very hard to write them. So she contented herself with a few scenes of humble life in which the comic and the pathetic were mingled. And as she fitted her characters to her actors, she hoped the little venture would prove that truth and simplicity had not entirely lost their power to charm. Mr. Lorry helped her, and they called themselves Beaumont and Fletcher, enjoying their joint labor very much, for Beaumont's knowledge of dramatic art was of great use in curbing Fletcher's too aspiring pen, and they flattered themselves that they had produced a neat and effective bit of work as an experiment. All was ready now, and Christmas Day was much enlivened by last rehearsals, the panics of timid actors, the scramble for forgotten properties, and the decoration of the theater. Evergreen and holly from the woods, blooming plants from the hothouse on Parnassus, and flags of all nations made it very gay that night in honor of the guests who were coming. Chief among them, Miss Cameron, who kept her promise faithfully. The orchestra tuned their instruments with unusual care. The scene shifters set their stage with lavish elegance. The prompter heroically took his seat in the stifling nook provided for him, and the actors dressed with trembling hands that dropped the pens, and perspiring brows whereon the powder wouldn't stick. Beaumont and Fletcher were everywhere, feeling that their literary reputation was at stake, for sundry friendly critics were invited, and reporters, like mosquitoes, cannot be excluded from an earthly scene, be it a great man's deathbed or a dime museum. "Has she come?" was the question asked by every tongue behind the curtain, and when Tom, who played an old man, endangered his respectable legs among the footlights to peep, announced that he saw Miss Cameron's handsome head in the place of honor. A thrill pervaded the entire company, and Josie declared with an excited gasp that she was going to have stage fright for the first time in her life. "I'll shake you if you do," said Mrs. Joe, who was in such a wild state of dishevelment with her varied labors that she might have gone on as Madge Wildlife without an additional rag or crazy elf lock. "You'll have time to get your wits together while we do our piece. We are old stagers and calm as clocks," answered Demi with a nod towards Alice, ready in her pretty dress and all her properties at hand. But both clocks were going rather faster than usual, as heightened color, brilliant eyes, and a certain flutter under the laces and velvet coat betrayed. They were to open the entertainment with a gay little piece which they played before and did remarkably well. Alice was a tall girl with dark hair and eyes and a face which intelligence, health, and a happy heart made beautiful. She was looking her best now, for the brocades, plumes, and powder of the Marquis became her stately figure. And Demi in his court suit with sword, three-cornered hat, and white wig made as gallant a baron as one would wish to see. Josie was the maid and looked her part to the life, being as pretty, pert, and inquisitive as any French soubrette. These three were all the characters, and the success of the piece depended on the spirit and skill with which the quickly changing moods of the quarrelsome lovers were given. Their witty speeches made to tell, and play-by-play suited to the courtly period in which the scene was laid. Few would have recognized sober John and studious Alice in the dashing gentleman and coquettish lady who kept the audience laughing at their caprices, while they enjoyed the brilliant costumes and admired the ease and grace of the young actors. Josie was a prominent figure in the plot as she listened at keyholes, peeped into notes, and popped in and out at all the most inopportune moments. With her nose in the air, her hands in her apron pockets, and curiosity pervading her little figure from the topmost bow of her jaunty cap to the red heels of her slippers, all went smoothly, and the capricious Marquis, after tormenting the devoted baron to her heart's content, owned herself conquered in the war of wits and was just offering the hand he had fairly won when a crash startled them, and a heavily decorated side scene swayed forward, ready to fall upon Alice. Demi saw it and sprung before her to catch it and hold it up, standing like a modern Samson with the wall of a house on his back. The danger was over in a moment, and he was about to utter his last speech when the excited young scene shifter, who had flown up a ladder to repair the damage, leaned over to whisper, "All right," and released Demi from his spread eagle attitude. As he did so, a hammer slipped out of his pocket to fall upon the upturned face below, inflicting a smart blow and literally knocking the baron's part out of his head. Oh my gosh. A quick curtain robbed the audience of a pretty little scene knocked down on the bill, for the Marquis flew to staunch the blood with a cry of alarm. "Oh, John, you're hurt. Lean on me," which John gladly did for a moment, being a trifle dazed, yet quite able to enjoy the tender touch of hands busied about him and the anxiety of the face so near his own, for both told him something which he would have considered cheaply won by a rain of hammers and the fall of the whole college on his head. Nan was on the spot in a moment with the case that never left her pocket, and the wound was neatly plastered up by the time Mrs. Joe arrived, demanding tragically, "Is he too much hurt to go on again? If he is, my play is lost." It's not like her, is it? "I'm all the fitter for it, Auntie, for here's a real instead of a painted wound. I'll be ready, don't worry about me." And catching up his wig, Denny was off, with only a very elegant look and thanks to the Marquis, who had spoilt her gloves for his sake, but did not seem to mind it at all, though they reached above her elbows and were most expensive. "How are your nerves, Fletcher?" asked Mr. Lorry as they stood together during the breathless minute before the last bell rings. "About as calm as yours, Beaumont," answered Mrs. Joe, gesticulating wildly to Mrs. Meg to set her cap straight. "Bear up, partner. I'll stand by you whatever comes. I feel that it ought to go, for though it's a mere trifle, a good deal of honest work and truth have gone into it. Doesn't Meg look the picture of a dear old country woman?" She certainly did, as she sat in the farmhouse kitchen by a cheery fire, rocking a cradle and darning socks as if she had done nothing else all her life. Gray hair, skillfully drawn lines on the forehead, and a plain gown with cap and little shawl and checked apron changed her into a comfortable motherly creature who found favor the moment the curtain went up and discovered her rocking, darning, and crooning an old song. In a short soliloquy about Sam, her boy who wanted to enlist, Dolly, her discontented little daughter who longed for city ease and pleasures, and poor Eliza, who had married badly and came home to die, bequeathing her baby to her mother, lest its bad father should claim it. The little story was very simply opened and made effective by the real boiling of a kettle on the crane, the ticking of a tall clock, and the appearance of a pair of blue worsted shoes which waved fitfully in the air to the soft babble of a baby's voice. Those shapeless little shoes won the first applause, and Mr. Lorry, forgetting elegance and satisfaction, whispered to his coadjutor, I don't know, "I thought the baby would fetch them. If the dear thing won't squall in the wrong place, we are saved. But it's risky. Be ready to catch it if all Meg's cuddlings prove in vain," answered Mrs. Joe, adding, with a clutch at Mr. Lorry's arm as a haggard face appeared at the window, "Here's Demi. Hope no one will recognize him when he comes on as the son. I'll never forgive you for not doing the villain yourself. Can't run the thing in Act Two. He's capitally made up and likes a bit of melodrama. This scene ought to have come later, but I wanted to show that the mother was the heroine as soon as possible. I'm tired of lovesick girls and runaway wives. We'll prove there's romance in old women also. Now he's coming." And in slouched, a degraded looking man, shabby, unshaven, and evil-eyed, trying to assume a masterful air as he dismayed the tranquil old woman by demanding his child. Powerful scene followed, and Mrs. Megg surprised even those who knew her best by homely dignity with which she at first met the man she dreaded. Then, as he brutally pressed his claim, she pleaded with trembling voice and hands to keep the little creature she had promised the dying mother to protect. And when he turned to take it by force, quite a thrill went through the house as the old woman sprung to snatch it from the cradle, holding it close, defied him in God's name to tear it from that sacred refuge. It was really well done, and the round of applause that greeted the fine tableau of the indignant old woman, the rosy, blinking baby clinging to her neck, and the daunted man who dared not execute his evil purpose with such a defender for helpless innocence, told the excited authors that their first scene was a hit. The second was quieter and introduced Josie as a bonny country lass, setting the supper table in a bad humor. The pettish way in which she slapped down the plates, hustled the cups, and cut the big brown loaf as she related her girlish trials and ambition was capital. Mrs. Joe kept her eye on Miss Cameron and saw her nod approval several times at some natural tone or gesture, some good bit of byplay or quick exchange of expression in the young face, which was as variable as an April day. Her struggle with the toasting fork made much merriment, so did her contempt for the brown sugar, and the relish with which she sweetened her irksome duties by eating it, and when she sat like Cinderella on the hearth, tearfully watching the flames dance on the homely room, a girlish voice was heard to exclaim impulsively, "Poor little thing, she ought to have some fun." The old lady enters, and mother and daughter have a pretty scene in which the latter coaxes and threatens, kisses and cries till she wins the reluctant consent of the former to visit a rich relation in the city. And from being a little thundercloud, Dolly becomes witchingly gay and good as soon as her wilful wish is granted. The poor old soul has hardly recovered from this trial when the son enters, in army blue, tells he has enlisted and must go. That's a hard blow, but the patriotic mother bears it well, and not till the thoughtless young folks have hastened away to tell their good news elsewhere does she break down. Then the country kitchen becomes pathetic as the old mother sits alone mourning over her children till the gray head is hidden in the hands, as she kneels down by the cradle to weep and pray, with only baby to comfort her fond and faithful heart. Sniffs were audible all through the latter part of this scene, and when the curtain fell, people were so busy wiping their eyes that for a moment they forgot to applaud. That silent moment was more flattering than noise, and as Mrs. Joe wiped the real tears off her sister's face, she said as solemnly as an unconscious dab of rouge on her nose permitted, "Meg, you have saved my play. Oh, why weren't you a real actress? And why aren't you a real actress? And I a real playwright? Don't gush now, dear, but please help me dress Josie. She's in such a quiver of excitement I can't manage her. And this is her best scene, you know." So it was, for her aunt had written it especially for her, and little Joe was happy in a gorgeous dress with a train long enough to satisfy her wildest dreams. The rich relations' parlor was in a festival array, and the country cousin sails in, looking back at her sweeping flounces with such artless rapture that no one had the heart to laugh at the pretty jay in borrowed plumes. She has confidences with herself in the mirror, from which it is made evident that she has discovered all is not gold that glitters, and has found greater temptations than those a girlish love of pleasure, luxury, and flattery bring her. She is sought by a rich lover, but her honest heart resists the allurements he offers, and in his innocent perplexity wishes mother was there to comfort and counsel. A gay little dance in which Dora, Nan, Bess, and several of the boys took part made a good background for the humble figure of the old woman in her widow's bonnet, rusty shawl, big umbrella, and basket. Her naive astonishment as she surveys the spectacle fills the curtains and smooths her old gloves during the moment she remains unseen was very good. But Josie's unaffected start when she sees her, and the cry, "Why, there's Mother!" was such a hearty little bit of nature it hardly needed the impatient tripping over her train as she ran into the arms that seemed now to be her nearest refuge. The lover plays his part, and ripples of merriment greeted the old woman's searching questions and blunt answers during the interview, which shows the girl how shallow love is and how near she had been to ruining her life, as bitterly as poor Eliza did. She gives her answer frankly, and when they are alone, looks from her own bedizened self to the shabby dress, work-worn hands, and tender face, crying with a repentant sob and kiss, "Take me home, Mother, and keep me safe. I've had enough of this." "That will do you good, Maria. Don't forget it," said one lady to her daughter as the curtain went down, and the girl answered, "Well, I'm sure I don't see why it's touching, but it is," as she spread her lace handkerchief to dry. Tom and Nan came out strong in the next scene, for it was a ward in an army hospital, and surgeon and nurse went from bed to bed, feeling pulses, administering doses, and hearing complaints with an energy and gravity which convulsed the audience. The tragic element, never far from the comic at such times and places, came in when, while they bandaged an arm, the doctor told the nurse about an old woman who was searching through the hospital for her son. After days and nights on battlefields, through ambulances, and among scenes which would have killed most women. She'll be here directly, and I dread her coming, for I'm afraid the poor lad who has just gone is her boy. I'd rather face a cannon than these brave women with their hope and courage and great sorrow," says the surgeon. "Ah, these poor mothers break my heart," adds the nurse, wiping her eyes on her big apron, and with the words Mrs. Meg came in. There was the same dress, the basket and umbrella, the rustic speech, the simple manners, but all were made pathetic by the terrible experience which had changed the tranquil old woman to that haggard figure with wild eyes, dusty feet, trembling hands, and an expression of mingled anguish, resolution, and despair which gave the homely figure a tragic dignity and power that touched all hearts. A few broken words told the story of her vain search, and then the sad quest began again. People held their breath as, led by the nurse, she went from bed to bed, showing in her face the alternations of hope, dread, and bitter disappointment as each was passed. On a narrow cot was a long figure covered with a sheet, and here she paused to lay one hand on her heart and one on her eyes, as if to gather courage to look at the nameless dead. Then she drew down the sheet, gave a long shivering sigh of relief, saying softly, "Not my son, thank God, but some mother's boy," and stooping down, she kissed the cold forehead tenderly. Somebody sobbed there, and Miss